Chuck Wiley is one of the great LSU defensive linemen in Tiger football lore. He was an All-SEC selection 3 times. He was a first-team All-SEC selection 2 years, and his final year at LSU in 1997 was All-SEC by 3 different publications. He went on to play in the NFL for 7 years, and he gives back to kids with free football camps for many years. Chuck, how you doing, man?
Not bad. What about yourself?
I'm great, man. I'm speaking to number 55 here, and you're in the Atlanta area these days after your long NFL career?
Yeah, I ended up staying here once I played with the Falcons. You got to think about. I went to Minnesota. I lived there for a while, then a short stint in New York, and just kind of kept someone place here, and just ended up staying here once everything kind of dust settled a little bit.
Well, good deal. Well, Chuck, LSU's in the middle of quote-unquote fall camp. There's nothing fall about it, right? There's no cool breeze blowing in or any of that. Were you part of the infamous Curly Hallman 3-a-days back in the day?
Yes. I would say yes. I would say I was, yes. That was 1993 and 94. It's crazy when I tell kids, they don't believe. I said we had 3-a-days, and I mean, you got to remember, as a freshman, those guys, we were at every practice, because mainly it was we had a nice, good, solid practice in the morning. Then like lunchtime was like a special teams practice, and then the evening was just another solid practice, not as hard probably, or they'll mix it up. The hard one would be in the evening, the lighter one in the morning. But we got it in, man. I just always wondered, how did I survive? But we survived.
Yeah, I guess there's a thin line between, okay, this is like military, we gotta tear these guys down and build them back up. But even if you're 18, 19, 20 years old, Chuck, right? I mean, if you don't have your legs when you hit the start of the season, that's bad news.
It is, but you got to think about this too, Jacques. Other programs are doing the same things. I just think it's the way you manage it. I look at it as it made me a tougher player, mentally stronger. I talked to my son as well as some of his teammates and different kids about that. When they ask me about football, I always ask them I tell them, I say, hey, it's when you play football, especially like in that conference, in SEC, and you play in the NFL, your mindset got to be different. You have to have a mentality, like it's just I always say that beast mode mentality. I mean, you cannot be stopped. No one's going to make you quit or anything like that. And a lot of times you got to think about we got kids now, man. I mean, heck, you go through warm-ups, they're ready to tap out. So it's different, man. And you got to remember, our generation, I thought we spent more time outside, so we were more acclimated to the heat compared to kids today are more inside playing video games. And I told somebody when I was in high school, I've never seen anybody overheat or had to get an IV or something like that. That just wasn't even that was unreal. And then we didn't even drink, all the Gatorades, all the Powerades, all the thirst quenchers or anything like that. We just had water. If we had water that day. But like I said, I just think it made you tougher and resilient.
Oh, there's certainly people that feel like it's gotten too soft in some regards in terms of training and whatnot. And then the Jerry Dinardo, I heard Chuck, Todd McClure and several people told me that Jerry Dinardo's first camp in 1995 was the toughest thing he's ever been through. It was just brutal.
Let me tell you this. It was, and I mean, it was. I know it tried to. One of the things I appreciated with Coach Dinardo was that he wanted to find out who can I depend on, who's tough and who's not tough. And you always say that old saying, that old analogy saying separate the boys from the men. And that's what he tried to see, who's going to quit on him, who's going to tap out or whatever. Because I'm being honest, Jacques, I remember it was a lot of kids that were, these high 5-star, 4-star kids. But they had been coddled so much at where they came from in their program, they never knew how to work. They didn't know how to compete. When it got, we live in Louisiana, so I mean it's hot. Yes, it's hot. It's humid, so you got to deal with it just like everybody else. And a lot of times, man, he just tried to push buttons to see who's going to compete, who's going to compete and who's not. And to me, I always just looked at it. I remember myself I remember we had some hell days, I called them, back in high school. And I mean, it was relentless. It was crazy. I think my coach, and God rest his soul, one of my coaches that did it, and actually my other coach, Coach Gerald's back at Southern Lab. I think they'll be arrested right now, Jacques, if some of the stuff they were doing back in the day was going on now. I mean, it will not be tolerated. But I mean, like I said, it made you a tougher person, and I think that's one thing Coach Dinardo did. But he got the best out of us when he did it.
Yeah, and you mentioned your high school days. I was doing some reading up on you before. You talk about an athlete here, folks. I mean, this guy, he's running on the 4x4 relay team. You're playing basketball on the football team. I saw you were catching passes. You were rushing the football, and you're playing defense. I mean, you did, these days kids seem more specialized. Oh, we do this sport, not this sport. You were doing everything at Southern Lab.
I would tell you, Jacques, people don't realize, I tell kids, at one time, Jacques, I was playing 5 sports at one time. And I had to stop when I got to the 10th grade and give it up. I was still playing soccer until I got to the 10th grade. it was still going. You got to remember, when I got to high school, my high school, actually, they got rid of the baseball team because of lack of funding and support. I was still playing baseball in the summers over at Anna T. Jordan over there in Scotlandville. So we kept being competitive, just doing stuff. I really believe, to me, kids need to do other sports. Baseball really helped me with my hand-eye coordination, depth perception, how to track a ball down. That's what really helped me when I was a tight end and playing linebacker. It just made you a better player. And I think about soccer with the footwork. One of the biggest ones I always tell kids is that, especially athletes, football players, they need to run track. Track was one of the best things that I think I ever did. I ran the 800. Like you said, I ran on 4x4. I also did the discus and shot. So it made me better, but it just made me so much tougher. My stamina, being able to sustain those heats and getting out there. And you gotta remember, in track, you have to give it up in track. You have to push yourself during practice. If you don't do it, you're doing yourself a disservice, especially your team, and you're not getting any better. So like I said, when I brought that track element, that track training to football, now it's not football, now there's no collision in it, but still, I'm talking about the conditioning, the stamina, the calisthenics, everything like that. It really helped me out as a football player. Yeah,
it's not every day you see defensive linemen running relays with the track team, right? And I looked you up. Your listed height and weight was 6'5", 274, which isn't light by any means. But watching you play, it almost like you came across as a linebacker, the way you moved and made tackles and hits and everything, almost like a guy putting his hand down in the dirt as a linebacker and going after the quarterback and the running back.
And Jacques, to be honest with you, you got to remember, when I signed with LSU, I was signing as a tight end linebacker. When I was in high school, my senior year, I think I weighed 220, 225, something like that. So a little bit small. I grew probably another inch. I was probably like 6'3" in high school, and grew, a couple more inches. And you got to remember that first year, that redshirt year, you get in the weight room, you got more strength coaches, you got better equipment, everything, nutrition. So got bigger, got stronger, got faster. But back then, to be fair, I was probably 220, 215. So that's a big difference from 270. So, and then when I ended up getting to LSU, they moved me over. You got to remember, I think the help was needed on defense, because you got to think about, we had David LaFleur, we had Harold Bishop, we had a bunch of those guys playing tight end. And I just saw an opportunity, and I wanted to play. My goal was to get in there and play, and ultimately get to the next level.
So Curly Hallman, all right, this is an easy target over the years for people to goof on Curly and the losing and whatnot. I think he did his best. He did recruit a lot of good players that Jerry Dinardo was able to coach up and win with. But what do you remember about Curly Hallman? 30 years ago was his first year at LSU, 1991.
Wow. Well, I would say this. I definitely appreciate Coach Hallman. I think he would, he got me to LSU. He recruited me hard and everything. I mean, he swayed me away. I mean, I was, Jacques, and I tell people that I was being honest with them. I almost ended up going with Auburn when I was in high school. It was Auburn came down. They recruited like 8 players down there in the metro, I say Baton Rouge and New Orleans area. I think the only guy was Bam Robinson out of Denham Springs. That was the only guy that ended up signing with Auburn. But Coach Witt was a good guy. But what happened, man, Coach Hallman kept talking to us and talking about what's establishing a footprint in the Baton Rouge area, keeping the kids there, making sure that, we get some of these local kids. Because when I was coming out of high school, you got to remember, it was frowned upon from coming from the north side of town going to LSU. You probably could go anywhere you wanted, but, don't go to LSU. And that was kind of that thing. And you got to remember, I had a guy that I played behind in my early years in high school with Gabe Northern. He was another guy that I talked to. And I talked to Leonard Harris. I think Leonard Harris probably was the biggest deciding factor for me outside of just talking to Coach Holman. Because when I talked to Leonard Harris and he had told me his experience and he had told me about, he said, man, it's a great place, is what you make out of it, and he said, I didn't make the best of my opportunity, but that doesn't have to be you. And I remember he just sold it. He did, it was signed, sealed, delivered after that. And but Coach Holman, I thought was a solid guy. I just think what Coach Holman didn't realize, I think he realized it after I think the transition where they moved on to Coach Dinardo, was that you didn't have to be so uptight. You saw other programs, you saw with Coach Bowden and some of those guys, they knew how to relate and kind of relax and just let your guys play. Let them be themselves. Let them have their personalities. Everything just can't be so militant and just like that. So just grunny. And I think that's what he didn't, I think he didn't figure that out until late, but nothing really bad to say about him. Good guy. I get on him. I actually saw Coach Dickey. He was the tight ends coach back then. And I saw him, I think he was actually at Memphis at the time, but I saw him. I always get on and say, you lied to me. You told me I was going to be a tight end. You lied. And he's like, who was that? And he's like, and he saw me and I told him, I said, but here's the thing, man. I remember I didn't want to move, even at that time, I didn't want to move from defensive end to defensive tackle, but what I did, because I had never played, I always played linebacker and I always played tight end. So I didn't really know how to pass rush. I didn't know how to do some of those things. And I think that's something that they thought I already knew how to do. I knew how to cover, everything like that. But it's still one of those moves that, hey, I didn't like it at the time, but it paid off, and it was a great move for me. And you got to remember, I played with a bunch of other talented guys on the line. You think about, and I told somebody, you think about all our starting defensive linemen when I was playing went to the NFL. Even the guys that played behind us went to the NFL. You look at Kenny Mixon, you look at Anthony McFarland, myself, Arnold Miller. You got you also have Rashawn Matthews that did. You had Mike Sutton. All those guys end up playing in the NFL, and we just had a talented group. Then you had a young Jarvis Green that was coming coming. That was right behind us, man. But I thought he did a really great job bringing that talent in. You remember that 92 class, all those running backs, and with Chris Hill and those guys, and we had a lot of talent, especially with Alan Stansbury coming back. He did a good job. It was just that, like I said, I just think as far as the part of managing it and just letting the kids play. And I just think that was the big downfall. Oh, and I would say this too: we still didn't get all the New Orleans kids that we needed. I mean, you got to remember during my era. I mean, I'm only 2 years behind. You think about Cardell Stewart, you think about Marshall Faulk, and we had a lot of those guys that just ended up slipping out of there. Warwick. I remember Warwick left and had to go. I remember because of the situation. He was my year, but you had a lot of those talented kids coming out of St. Aug that was slipping out of there. Yeah, I think that was another factor, because you got to remember that's our recruiting pool. That's our big spot, the Metro New Orleans area. So.
Yeah, you make some good points. I talked to Michael Clayton yesterday, and he even spoke about that. Being a guy of color growing up in Baton Rouge, it wasn't always the thing to to go to LSU, and you coming from, like you said, you came from the north side of town there, and Southern and the Jags and all that, and so there was that going on.
And one note you got in mind is both of my parents are Southern University graduates. And I mean, my family, I have an older cousin. He's like an uncle, but he's passed away now. He actually played for A.W. Mumford back in the day. So you got to think about how deep those roots are. And then you got to think about you got an older cousin that played with Grambling with Coach Sterling. He played there. You think about Doug Williams, my distant cousin. So we were always surrounded by the SWAC. So that's all we knew. That's the only football. My parents, that's where they went to games. They went to tailgating over there. That's what we grew up around, man. So, but I loved some of those other players, man. I think about Tracy Porter that played that when I was a little kid. I remember him being I was real small, but I remember just watching him on TV because I was a little kid watching, he's right from my same neighborhood, my same area and stuff. So that's it was good to see those local guys.
And just a quick footnote, I mean, on that, I don't think the first black player came to LSU until 72, which really is not that long ago, and there were a lot of people that of color that they didn't go to LSU games. They went to the Bayou Classic to see Southern and Grambling, or they went to HBCU games growing up. So that was of that generation. You were of that. Your parents were of that generation, coming up. So anyway, Michael Clayton did cry when I interviewed him about when Southern and LSU both won their national championship in 2003, and there was the Parade of Champions, and everybody came together and celebrate those two teams. So,
hey, Jacques, I would say this too, and I had a friend tell me this, man. I think about myself and like Gabe. I remember we bridged, Allen too, Stansbury too as well. We bridged a big gap with especially the local Baton Rouge kids going to LSU, because if you think about it, a lot of those kids were just going off other places. I mean, I'm thinking even like Baron Jackson was like one of the greatest players that ever came out of my high school, ended up going to Pitt. And he was and you just think about like they didn't go there. And I guess because of those experiences and stuff. But one of the things I know, I actually had a friend from middle school told me, he said, man, he said, I didn't watch LSU football until you and Gabe started playing. He said, I never watched it. And it was a lot of other guys that I grew up with, different things, because we made it like, it was almost like, I mean, I'm just, not tooting my own horn, but it was like we made it like it was cool to go there. It wasn't a problem. Yeah. Then now, on top of going there, you graduate, you succeed, you go to the NFL, and that's what they looked at. And they saw it, say, you can actually go there, and succeed. So I think that was, I'm really proud of that as being one of those bridge builders for other kids that grew up in my community that see it, that, hey, it's a good place. It's just what you make out of it. It's just like, to me, it's like any other school, it's great place, great tradition. I think we're above it. I'm a little biased. LSU is a little better than everybody else. But I mean, just like I said, I'm just glad that we did that and got our local kids watching. I think about Marcus Spears. He was I think he's about 8 or 10 years behind me. I think it's about 8. But I remember him saying that, like he said, I remember watching you as a kid playing and, seeing you guys. And he said that was a big factor, because you got to remember, we same high school, same area, and they watched us doing it, and that helped out, with those local kids.
Yeah. And another Southern lab tight end who moved to defensive line, right? Marcus Spears doing that. So, yeah, and to your point, in the 90s, Chuck, you go to high school, remember they had the starter jackets. Everyone was wearing those starter jackets, those big puffy jackets. And it was Miami, Florida State, Nebraska. Those were the cool teams. LSU had 6 straight losing seasons from 89 to 94. LSU was not cool. You guys kind of made LSU cool again. And obviously when Kevin Falk comes in, that takes it to another level and the talent starts rolling in, right?
I would say this. Kevin in that 95 class definitely came in with Rondell and those guys. They definitely came in and helped out. But you got to think about, too, the bridge was already being built. Remember I told you, Coach Holman got the talent there. It was just, you got to think about this. We had, you think about Coach Holman's classes, some of those classes, you still had Torrey James. Torrey James was a 3-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Super Bowl champion with Denver. You think about, like I said, Harold Bishop was tight end, played for Tampa. We had Kevin Mawai, Pro Football Hall of Famer. You had
Alan Faneca.
Yeah.
Faneca just goes in the Hall of Fame. Now, some guy goofed. He said he was redshirted, but maybe he wasn't ready to play. I don't know, but that was
but the thing is that that talent was there, and here's the part: we didn't win my redshirt year, my freshman year. But I think by that year, I think we ended up going 5-6 in '94. We just needed to win one more game. You remember we took down you remember the year before we were the first one to take down Alabama when they won the national title back in '92. We got them in '93. So I think it was there. It was coming, but we just had to really pull it out, man. And like I said, we had a lot of talent, man. And one of the things I know guys said was that, hey, we're going to change this culture. There's no more losing. I mean, we ended up going, I want to say 7-3, 10-2, and 9-3. My last 3 years there.
Well, here's the deal about what's great about your story. Okay, so 1994, November the 12th, Chuck, is regarded by a lot of people as rock bottom for LSU football. When you guys lost to Southern Miss in Tiger Stadium, they said there was 51,000 people there. The estimate was more like 40,000, and just not the way it should be, right? And so then in 1997, a few years down the road, you beat Florida in front of a packed, crazy house when they're number one in the country. So just kind of talk to me about that. Talk to me about going from the losing to the winning there at LSU.
I remember that game too, man. It was rough. I mean, but mind you, now you gotta remember that was a team with another guy we let slip through. They had a Pat Surtain on that team. You had a Delius Thomas, Bobby Hamilton. Yeah, I mean, that was a loaded Southern Miss. That wasn't your average Southern Miss team. So I mean, all those guys played NFL. But it was one of those games that I think we took it for granted. And like I said, it was the same thing where we were just so robotic as opposed to let them play loose. And I think it changed that. You got to think about, we started winning after that game. I think we ended up losing the last game to Arkansas, but we ended up, definitely beating Tulane like crazy. And we just went down the line and started winning some games, and I guess tried to send Curly out on a good note. And then you fast forward it all the way to that 97 year, man. I thought I would really believe that we had arrived. I thought that Auburn game early on, we slipped. We made a few errors that really cost us. I talked to some friends now, some colleagues now that played at Tennessee, and I told them that we should have been playing you guys in the SEC championship. You think about, we tied for the SEC West title, I think twice. 1 year with Alabama, then 1 year with Auburn, that we should have been playing in it. And we had opportunities. Yeah. We didn't make the best of them. But you think about that game, man, we put on a show. I remember that day so well, because I remember I went to do an interview. You were probably in there too, Jacques, where every question was asked, well, how are you going to stop them? Oh, well, do you think you're going to score? I mean, it was so disrespectful. I just remember I remember I kind of like just slammed my hand or did something like, I said, I basically said, just bring your A to the game on Saturday. You'll see what we're going to do. And I remember I walked out and didn't do the interview. And I called a team meeting that game, right before that game. And I remember I showed them that paper and how they just talked about all of, you remember it was all Riedel Anthony. It was
Greg Taylor, running back.
Yes. Yeah, Mo Collins online. They kept talking about how great Mo was. I just remember I just kept hearing it. And I remember I said a lot of choice words I don't want to say now. And we're gonna beat these beat until they whatever. And I remember we had a team meeting and we all came together that one evening. And I remember it just worked out. I mean, you saw Sid playing at a top level. You saw Kevin doing his thing. Tommy Banks doing his thing. Everybody just did their job. Herb did his thing. I always think Herb was our unsung hero. Herb really kept us together, man. As far as we needed that X factor, it was Herb. Herb really, he did the deal. Always cool under pressure. He just, he made it work, man. And the thing is that we had the talent. We didn't have the depth like LSU teams of lately, but we had enough talent to get things done. And what happened after that, I'm thinking about the Ole Miss game. I remember that week. I think we did 9 on 7 like right after that. I mean, I remember we just literally got beat up at practice all week. It was kind of like proving a point. It was just one game, and I mean, I don't necessarily think of being celebratory, doing that kind of. But it's kind of where like, hey, your guys, it's kind of. I saw if you think about the approach the NFL does. Once a buddy of mine was telling me how Mike Shanahan used to do in Denver when they started winning, they was getting ready to win the Super Bowl, was when they started taking care of business and winning games, practice was more, they got out of pads, they got shelled. He took care of their legs. He made them like, okay, we're going to practice. It's going to be crisp. It's going to be precise. No errors. Everybody be here on time. Everybody do what they're supposed to be doing. And then guess what? They won 2 Super Bowls off that, with Elway and those guys and Shannon Sharp. But I just think we came there, man. It was almost like we were doing fall camp again in the middle of that day. And you remember they changed the time. We played Ole Miss early in the day. It was almost we were walking in mud, man. Just worn out. And I'm not making an excuse for it. We didn't get it done. We still had an opportunity to win the game. They came there and they did their thing, man. So yeah, and that's all she wrote in that one.
It was almost like it sounds like you were punished for winning. It was almost like there was such a fear that you guys would get the big head and ego that, we're going to wear you out and everything. So.
Well, coach actually told us in the meeting, he said the stadium at that time was only 87,000, 89,000 people. He said, I almost had 100,000 people that said they were in the stadium saying that they loved it. So he said he had 100,000 people called him over since the game. I mean, Dinardo was a comedian, so he would always say those little jokes. And man, I had all these people calling me, and I guess and it was going crazy. It was almost like we won the national title, and it was just one game. And I thought we could play with Florida. We can play with those guys. They're human. I always look at people. They're human just like us. Because it was. What's funny? I remember even in. I want to say this was Eddie's last year. We actually had this was in 95. We actually had an opportunity to beat Florida again at home. And I remember they called 2 touchdowns back. They called a punt return back he had. And it was another, I think a kickoff or something he had. And they called it back. And it really just put us in a hole. I remember the media kept saying, man, you guys just couldn't stop Danny Warfel. And I was like, well, we had 7 sacks. What are you talking about? We did get to them. They made plays, man. Like it. And the guy kind of looked dumbfounded. You're right. You guys did have 7 sacks. Yeah. So we couldn't get the quarterback.
That was the game Booger McFarland caught a touchdown from Jamie Howard. And then Booger told me, he said after he caught it, he said, now I know what it feels like to be an Auburn defensive player catching a pass from Jamie Howard. I'm like, oh, that's a low one.
I'm not gonna say it. Look, I talked to Jamie for the first time this summer. I met his son at Ed Ogeron's camp, Coach Ogeron's camp. Great guy, man. I always used to tell my son about Jamie, because I said was talking about how to manage sports. I mean, you remember he was doing the stuff with the Braves and playing baseball and coming back then playing football. But I just thought our staff during that time, and they put him in a bad position. I think it was Lynn Amity was offensive coordinator then. But you got to think about it. We had the game won. We're still trying to go for the juggler as opposed to ball control, run the ball. We had those running backs, just run the clock out. We win the game, and we put him in a bad position. We're throwing in nickel coverage, and we're throwing bombs to Brett Best in nickel coverage. He's a 2-man route on nickel. It was like, oh gosh. So I just started looking back at us. I mean, it was just crazy what we were doing. So to me, I tell people all the time, you just can't blame him. He has to do his job and run the play that was called. He can't sit there and say, I'm going to do what I want to do. So I tell people that all the time. You got you can't have it both ways. Either you want him to be loyal to his coach and do the right thing, or you want him to be a rebel, or I'm going to do my own thing, whatever. So, but it just can't be both ways. But it was tough.
Yeah, that's what I told him, Chuck. I interviewed Jamie last year, and I said, where are the adults in this situation to stop calling these pass plays? I mean, you guys could have run the fullback 3 times and punted and won that game as you guys were dominating them defensively. I saw Terry Bowden the other day, who's now the head coach at at UL Monroe, and he's like, well, they just kept throwing it. They just kept throwing it. So we said, okay, so that was
yeah. I remember I had a fumble recovery that game. I still get teased about it because I saw him at a youth camp. I saw his son is playing now, Nix.
Oh yeah, Patrick
Nix,
Bo
the
Nix's
dad.
son.
Yeah, Bo Nix. Yeah, I saw him and he made the tackle on me after the fumble recovery. So I always get that, man. We played our butts off on it, man. And but it's just like I said, that's something that as a player you can control what you can control. I mean, all we kept doing is just going out there playing defense. That's all we could do. And we were trying to do our job, man. We were doing our jobs, and it just unfortunately didn't happen. But it falls back at the end of the day, though, Jacques, it falls back on the head coach. The head coach manages the game. That is his job, to make sure, hey, we're doing the right things, and even he can, supersede that offense coordinator or do, hey, look, let's run the ball. Hey, get him under center. Let's just run the ball. And it's just and that didn't happen. And I think that was one of those daggers that still hung around Coach Holman and everything.
Yeah, I think if Twitter existed today and social media, I'm not sure if he would have been the coach on Monday. It just would have the way that game went down. But I'll tell you what, better memory. Go ahead.
Well, hey, one thing I'll tell you too that was really I thought was unfair too, and people don't realize this. I don't know if you remember that time. Jamie was getting death threats. During that time. I don't know if you remember that, man. I think they had a replica, a noose or something like that in the quad or something. I remember something silly. They were that's when we had those phones in the room, and they were calling the phones in our dorm rooms and stuff, threatening them, saying different things. I just remember he didn't really have a lot of protection during that time too. You got some fans that take it too far, And like you said, where's the adults, the police that like, good dude, it's a football game. They lost. Let's move on and look, hey, you want to get rid of coach? Fine. You don't want him at fine, but it doesn't need to go to that. So.
Well, you're a teenager. You're doing the best you can. I can't even imagine being out there. I used to sit up in the stands and watch you guys play and be nervous. If you guys were going to win or lose, I can't imagine impacting the game myself, So he's doing the best he can, and I can't imagine, he told me about it. He told me he'd walk around on campus and there'd be comments and smirks or whatever. Can you imagine some little pencil neck, 120-pound guy trying to goof on you for the way you played in the game? I'd have a hard time containing myself for sure.
What we did, man, we always look at it like this. Hey, look, my scholarship is for free. I'm gonna graduate just like you are. I'm gonna do some things that you still dream about doing, and you're gonna be right there in your little miserable life, sending all these death threats and crazy, man. You can do all, as long as you don't touch me or do anything to my family, I'm fine. It's like. Somebody's always going to, you got to remember, somebody's always going to have something to say. It's nothing you're going to do perfectly. They're going to have, you're going to offend somebody. You talk about, hey, it's hot outside, and you have somebody offended. Why are you talking about the sun? Seriously, that's what goes on now. It's been going on. So.
Even the great Tom Brady, someone's tweeting at him saying, "Hey, you lost 2 to Eli. You lost 2 Super Bowls to Eli." So somebody's gonna have something to say about anything.
Yeah. Well. Hey, listen. Eli was my teammate, so I'm one of those fans. I'm gonna put Eli there. He did it, but the thing is, though, when the teams went head to head, Eli won the games. We gotta go with the facts,
Is he a Hall of Famer, Chuck Wiley? Eli Manning, is he a Pro Football Hall of Famer?
I always heard if you have to think about it, probably not. I would say he would be close, but probably not.
It's crazy. That's a crazy dynamic. He won just as many Super Bowls as his brother, but his overall career, So,
but you got to ask yourself, what is our criteria? Are we going off Super Bowl wins? Are we going off regular season wins? Because you got to think about it. They got some people that didn't win a Super Bowl. Like you think about when he got in, but Dan Marino had so many yards, so many touchdowns, doing some stuff. Like you got to remember, he was doing this when safeties were allowed to headhunt back in the day. That's why I tell people, like, you cannot tell me anything about the receivers now and not, that's why I still say the GOAT was Jerry Rice. those guys. They were still going across, and Taylor and all those guys were going. Chris Carter, they were going across the middle when you could go across the middle and lay somebody out, and still they would get all those yards. It's just not even real. Or you think about even I always tell people about, like, to me, Joe Montana was still, to me, is a better quarterback than Tom Brady. Why? Joe Montana, I watched some tape, and I remember used to get his just block knocked off and get hit in the knee. You gotta remember, they hit Tom Brady in the knee. They changed the rule the following season. That's how you gotta think about it. To me, it's just like, yeah, that's why you can play to you gotta remember, we're only about 2 years apart in age. So that, yeah, you could probably play to your 50 years old if nobody can touch you.
Right.
Yeah, what was that one hit Lawrence Taylor laid on Joe Montana in that playoff game? He probably gets suspended half the season if he did that these days. So
or arrested.
Right.
Exactly. So look, a few games I want to talk to you about. So 1995, the Auburn game, the bring back the magic game, probably one of my favorite games in LSU history. This was the first time the stadium was truly sold out and you had a true atmosphere. Auburn 5th in the country. And as we know, the interception game against Auburn the year before, it was a defensive game. 12-6 final score. Troy Twilley, the interception in the end zone to wrap it up for the LSU Tigers. What do you remember about that night in Tiger Stadium?
I remember that you couldn't touch Twilley with a 10-foot pole. He was on cloud 9. No, but it was a really good game, man. We played our butts off. A buddy of mine over here, he actually should be in the Hall of Fame too. Willie Anderson. I don't know if you remember him. He played offensive tackle for Auburn. And when he always bring up stuff, I always bring up. I say, do you remember that game? And you have to remind him sometime, man, about some of those games. But that was a good game. That was one of those games saying, hey, this culture is changing, and that's what I think that game was. It was one of those deals. It was national TV. You remember it had it measured at a small earthquake that game that evening or something like that. And, Auburn has always been one of those rivals. I tell people all the time, like, that Auburn game is one of those games that's always going to be like 9-6, 10-13 or something like. It's always going to be a game where it's close. It's going to be close. It's going to be defense. It's going to be a nail bite. It's going to be, running the ball, and it's going to be a physical game. But I thought it was a heck of a game, man, that we did. And guys, we wanted it. And it was just because I think, what was that? The previous years I think really, you think about this, the previous year, that's when we had the comeback game. And I think we as a program, and I remember Coach talked about it that week, wanted to prove a point. Like, that wasn't a fluke. We were supposed to beat you guys. Mm-hmm. And I think that hangover, that taste was in everybody's mouth, and we got after it, man. We got after them.
1995 also, LSU goes to Shreveport, and for those who were around at the time, it was a big deal that LSU was going to a bowl game and won a bowl game against none other than Nick Saban, the head coach of Michigan State, who had these big Coke bottle glasses back then. Eddie Kennison, Kevin Falk going nuts that game up in Shreveport. Big bowl win for the Tigers.
You remember? Hey, do you remember too? That's when they used to have a big Reebok logo, and I remember it almost looked like a tattoo on Nick Saban's turtleneck. But it was the big Reebok thing. We had a big game. I remember Gabe had a big game on that deal too as well. I think he ran. There was an interception, a fumble back, man. It was a long run. It was crazy. Tony Banks. I remember Gilliard had a big sack on there. We beat them up, man. And I always remind people, because people always ask me, you remember I said that earlier, and no disrespect to Nick Saban, but I mean, Nick Saban was human too. He wasn't winning like this, like he's doing now back then. I said, when we played Nick Saban, we beat him, and you got to think about, on that team, he had Flozell Adams, he had Muhsin Muhammad, Tony Banks, you had Isaiah Reese, linebacker. He had a bunch of NFL. You had Mason, the receiver, played with the Titans. You had a bunch of NFL guys on that team, man, and we beat them up. Because to me, it was always if you think about during that time, Jacques, like when I just remember we had our teams, we always had the same numbers for our stats, doing some of the same thing, but because of the Big Ten's cachet or whatever, like because of what they used to be or whatever like that, and always Michigan, Ohio State. I remember all those guys used to always get all the postseason awards for everything. And I was like, man, because I remember the thing was that, like, nothing against them. I remember even going to like the Senior Bowl, and it was a guy that just got off Michigan's team. This was Michigan. He played defensive line. I'll never forget this. We were doing bag drills. He couldn't do the bag drill. He couldn't move lateral. And this kid was voted All-American. And I was like, what is really going on? I said, man, in this conference. And, nothing against those other players. And they've had some great players. Nothing against them. But it was just that I just always saw that. To me, it just seemed like they just always picked those guys because of the conference they were in and where they went to school. And then probably somebody could say that now about us with the SEC because the conference we're in.
Yeah. Well, Notre Dame obviously not in a conference, but what you're talking about, that kind of
consider other sports are in the Big Ten still. Yeah.
That kind of media bias towards Notre Dame and the great tradition and all that. Another thing too, Chuck, what I understand, the recruiting used to be able to bring a kid on campus at Notre Dame, Michigan in the spring. It's nice. And then they didn't realize how cold and miserable it gets up there. And so the more your kids start going to Florida and, Alabama, Florida State, LSU. So
I would say this was good. I would say this was good about the Independence Bowl too, is that game was in Shreveport. So I think they were smart. They did a big recruiting blitz and had those kids come to Shreveport. Because you got to think, you were still in state and you still got a chance to see us play. And we had a lot of those kids come in, man. And, we always did our best to make sure we were trying to get them. The one guy I would definitely say, man, I still to this day don't know how we lost him. I remember taking him out and everything was Reggie Wayne. That was the one I was like, that kid wanted to come to LSU. And at that time, I don't think he's coaching. I think Bob McConnell botched that up. Bob McConnell, during his trip, he kept talking about Abram Booty. And just think about it, Jacques. That's that's just almost like you're dating, Susie over here, but you keep talking about Mary over here. I don't want to hear about Susie if you're trying to date me. So it was one, and that was one of the reasons why we lost him. I always think about that during some of that time because I remember at that time we had two guys from John Ehret on our team with Johnny Mitchell and Theo Williams, some John Ehret Patriot guys. So we were trying to tap into that pipeline. But I just think, too, going to that game, I think about when we went there, the budget for that game went up. You remember it was under $1 million then, but us coming there and selling it out and just, being in Shreveport and everything like that, we changed the dynamics of that game. That game has grown, especially at that Independence Bowl, man. You get a local team there.
And there's so many bowls now. There were a lot less bowl games back then. I think now you got 40 bowl games maybe, so that's 80 teams playing in the postseason, and you got 127 FBS schools. I'll watch every game that's on. I love football, so I'll watch it. But how many bowls is too many bowls? But all right, and then you also beat Notre Dame again. In your last game as a Tiger, I guess that was Rondell Mealy's finest hour. Ran for a ton of yards against Notre Dame that year, and you beat Clemson the year before in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. Low scoring game, 10-7.
Jacques, we got to definitely throw this out here, man. I tell some of when the kids always ask me all the time about some of those great guys, and they were asking me, you remember even in that game, I had 3 sacks that game, and people don't even realize. But you got to remember back then, bowl game stats didn't count. We didn't get the stats.
I'm still confused on that. I'm still confused. Do they count? Do they not?
So Jacques, I'm gonna give you a couple things that happened during my time at LSU. So if you remember back during the 96, 95 season, that's when they had Florida State had Peter Boulware and Andre Wadsworth. And I just remember we were one of the top teams in the state. In the country with sacks. But I remember Florida State had doubled us in numbers. And one of the reasons why they doubled us was because when they were tackling the quarterback, they would just, what they do now, just swipe the ball off and knock the ball. That's considered a sack. When we did it, how we did stats at LSU, we call that a caused fumble. And that was like, it was crazy because actually, if you go back, and I tell people, go back and look at that game, I had the record for the most sacks in one game against South Carolina. There was one play, I knocked the ball out of Steve Tannehill's hand, and they called that a caused fumble. So actually, I had 5 sacks in that game instead of 4. But I mean, but that's just how they did it. And even this, moving forward, you know, it was like I want to say I had 3 sacks in that Notre Dame game in Independence one. I think I had 1 in Michigan State. I think it was 1. But like I said, they didn't count those stats, so it was almost like you're just playing for nothing. But what they did after we left, I want to say maybe 2002, 2001, or I don't know when it was. That's when they started counting those stats because it was a lot of things, man. I just always look at, sometimes, you know, you look at numbers and you look at what some guys did. And I was like, man, I said, I'm looking at my numbers. I'm looking at this guy, and I was like, okay. But the thing is, people always got, with the older guys, you got to count in how it was then. They wasn't counting knocking the ball out of the quarterback's hand. They wasn't counting bowl game stats. Even the SEC championship, you know, that was considered like a bowl game. They weren't counting those stats or whatever, and they count it now.
All right, a few more things with the great Chuck Wiley. So what was it like to team up with Booger McFarland? And did you could you envision, he's become this big personality on ESPN?
I didn't envision him being a big personality. I just think, I remember Booger had that name that it just stuck out, Booger. Everybody, a lot of people don't realize his first name is Anthony. So that was one of those things.
And a lot of people don't realize your first name too. I looked it up here. So
yeah, it's biblical. It's Samuel.
There you go. But not Sammy. No one calls you Sammy, right?
No. And let me tell you something. And I think I told it was a coach. I can't think who it was. But I saw an old coach from one of them old staffs back in the day, and Curly Holman was the one that started, and I hated it. He kept calling me Chucky Sam or something like that, and I said, and out of respect, I didn't want to say anything, but I will correct you. I will ignore you if you call me that. So my thing is, don't ever call me that. Like, that was just one of those, like, that's not my name, you know? And look, I told people I don't have a problem calling me Samuel. Just don't call me Sam or Sammy. That's not my name. It's Samuel if you call it. So
what did it sound like? Chucky Sam? Curly Holman here? Chucky Sam?
Yeah, no, yeah. Hey, now look, he could have been a stunt double for one of the guys out of what's that old show, the Dukes of Hazzard, like one of those good country shows, or Heat of the Night. He had a real strong accent, man. But that's how he used to say, Chucky Sam, come here. What you doing?
Oh, man.
Well, look, a few current issues. All right, LSU feels like they're real deep on their defensive line this year. Obviously last year, not a whole lot of defense played at Louisiana State University. But how are you feeling about this year's team and moving forward?
Oh, let me do this too. Let me tell you this, and I didn't get a chance to answer. I enjoyed playing with Booger. I thought we were one of the best foundations as far as starting that D line. To me, not don't get me wrong, they had other guys before that, but we were one of those guys that set that foundation. I always call us D line U. We had fun. Booger was a great player. I think we complemented each other. How we played, got along really well, and far as just talking and communicating and playing together. It was just like what happened. We both became starters in '95. They had some guys. I think it was David Cremona. It was another cat, Pete Bursich, that started before us. And I'll never forget, they got hurt in training camp and they never came back. They tried to come back like a week before the game, but Booger and I were healthy and won the starting job the whole week, and ended up, man, we kept the job and we hadn't looked back since. So like I said, it was a great experience with him, and I know he'd probably say the same thing far as just us playing with each other, just setting that foundation with the D line and everything. But I would say, what were we talking about with current events? Go ahead.
This year's LSU team, they feel like they're real deep on their defensive line. Obviously, their defense was historically bad last year, although obviously we're in the era of offense, points. But what's your feeling about LSU this year and their D-line?
And Jacques, here's something I always tell people you got to be fair about with when you look at things, because people don't understand this. LSU from that national championship team was running a 3-4 scheme with 3-4 personnel. Then all of a sudden you switch and go to a 4-3 with 3-4 personnel. You don't have pass rushers. You don't have those inside backers that you normally have. You got a bunch of outside backers. You got a bunch of two-gappers, space eaters. You don't have those inside guys. And people don't understand, it's really hard to do that. If you think about when we played, my last year, we hired Lou Tepper. Lou Tepper came from Illinois, was running the 3-4 with Greg Hardy and Simeon Rice. We didn't have Greg Hardy and Simeon Rice, and they didn't do as well that following year. If you remember that, Coach Dinardo's last year, but what he did was smart. And if you think about this, what he did was smart in that Notre Dame. He coached the Notre Dame game. If you think about it, Carl Reese ended up resigning. I think he left and ended up going to Texas. But what he did, he kept some of the same principles that we had in the 4-3 scheme, and then now he would implement certain things, small pieces. When we played Notre Dame, that's why we were so successful, because he had seen him before coaching from Illinois, and that's to me, that's I think. I can't think of the defense coordinator's name now. I'm thinking the guy that just they let go. He was there before.
Well, Dave Aranda went to Baylor, and they just fired Bo Pelini.
That's what I'm thinking about, the coach from Nebraska and Youngstown. That's Bo Pelini. To me, he went in all. You got to think about it. And we went through a pandemic. We were not able to. You think about those walkthroughs, those meetings. You think about that quality time that a position coach has with his players, the defense coordinator has with his defensive staff and everything. People don't understand. And on top of that, you had players that opted out. You had players that ended up going early or graduated. You lost a lot of talent, and you switched the whole scheme. You think about the verbiage, philosophy, and you don't have an off season, no spring. It's really that's the only mulligan I would give him. The only thing I would have said was that, hey, you would probably have to implement small pieces of that 4-3. Don't totally go away from the 3-4, because you were successful all these years with the 3-4, and that's the personnel you have on your roster. Your roster is what it is. I mean, that's who they had. So, and you had a lot of those new guys. What was his name? Allie Gay. I want to say you had him, and you had the linebacker that came from North Dakota State. Really good player. I watched him the other night. He's really good. Jabril Cox. He was a really good player, and like you had a lot of new guys coming in that just, they were new. But I think what now you got some of these kids got a year under their belt. You got Stingley coming back. You remember, I always tell people that first game I think they lost to Missouri last year. If he plays in that game, they win. It would have changed out a lot of things, man. You had so many different things that just kind of hit LSU at the wrong time. But now I think that everything's all fair now, as far as you've got a year on your belt. We still, actually, you still got to think about this. This is the third defensive coordinator in 3 years. That's 3 coordinators, that they're going to have. And now you got to think about it. They have to learn all over again. But you had a spring. You had fall camp, you had summer workouts, you had all these things in place. And I'm gonna tell you this, I know one of the assets people don't realize, you got Coach Moffitt over there in the weight room. He does a great job year after year getting the guys ready and getting prepared physically. You got all those pieces, man. I think they're gonna be solid. And I'm gonna tell you who I can't wait to see, Jacques. I can't wait to see Ty Davis Price. That's who I can't wait to see. I think I don't know what happened last year. They were just trying to please everybody. Just, hey, you get 5 carries, you get 5, you get 6, you get 6. To me, I mean, this is a guy that came in his freshman year and really helped that team go to a championship. I mean, he came in and stepped up. You already had Clyde, but you had another, Baton Rouge kid right from Southern Lab coming in there doing his thing, man. I think he's a good player. He's coming back healthy. I know he's banged up a little bit in the spring, but I think he'll be solid coming forward. And you got the other kid coming right behind him, man. That's going to really push him too as well. I think that Emory. It's going to be a good push with everything, man. So I'm really excited to see them. And another guy was happy. I talked to him. Actually, I took my son to Ed Ogeron's camp this summer, and I got a chance to talk to some of the guys. And I actually talked to Ingram, and real good kid. And I just had a conversation with him, and I just talked about like setting that tone, and just I told him about some of the guys that we used to have, like with Faneca and Mawai. I said, go watch tape of those guys. Watch how physical and dominating they were. And I'm not saying he wasn't physical and dominating, but what they did, they worked as one cohesive unit, with Todd and all those guys. Todd wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but Todd played physical. Todd played fast. Todd used every inch of his athletic ability and made plays, and was a great player, and a great player in the NFL for a long time. We're actually teammates together in Atlanta. But I was glad to talk to some of those guys, man. Happy to see them, and I'm looking forward to them doing their thing this year and turning it around. I think they're going to be solid. It's too much talent on that team for them not to be successful. So I think they're going to be good to go.
Well, look, I really appreciate it. I just wanted, certainly I saw your name pop up on some of these podcasts and stuff the other day. They were rating defensive linemen, and so certainly I think some people haven't heard from you in a long time and deserve to hear from you. So I appreciate you doing this today, man.
Hey, and look, Jacques, I'm glad some of them guys remember. Jacques, you got to do a poll, man, and do some of that stuff. Yeah, I tell you, I tell everybody, I said, I know we didn't win the championship like the national titles, different things like these teams are. But some of our guys, I put them up with anybody. And I know myself personally, I put my numbers up to anybody. Jacques, at one time I was a defensive tackle. I was second in tackles in 96. And I told you, and let me tell you this, I tell people, look, get your fans to go do this. Go look at that Kentucky game in 95 with the purple pants. I remember that stat sheet had 22 tackles. I had 22 tackles and 1 sack. And I told you, Mike Tollison got real PO'd at Booger and I, and mainly me, but because I was the elder statesman, that we didn't run a technique right. But I'm like, but coach, I stopped almost every run that ran through down the middle. but it was, and he kept saying, you would have had 30 if you would have did what I said. So, but still, he got upset. And I think he moved my number down to 18. And then I saw somebody posted on social media said it was probably 20 or something like that. But yeah, it is. Well, I just always know, man. Myself and those guys I played with gave their best, gave it all. And I know we tried to change the culture, and I think we did, and help with that. Keeping that local talent there. I'm glad to see too a lot of some of my former teammates on the staff with Eddie Kennison there and Kevin Mawai being there. Sad to hear about Coach Nader retiring. I actually got time to spend with him when I was down there watching my son. Coach Nader had been at LSU since my birth year. He was one of the guys that first recruited me and everything. And he, like I said, I had a real good time talking. And it's crazy. Coach Nader remembers every single story, recruiting trip, kid, everything. You cannot get anything past him. So my hat's off to him. And I definitely appreciate him being one of those guys, one of those stalwarts there, and just getting those kids there, man. And just being he's just overall good guy. You know what I'm saying? Even though he's a Auburn War Eagle, he's still a good guy.
Awesome. Well, Chuck, really appreciate it, man. Salute to number 55 of the LSU Tigers. Thanks for being on today, man.
Thank you. Hey, Jacques, go ahead and we'll let you go so you can go do some scouting and do some good reporting down there at Southern Lab, man.